6:54. Yeah, all right, we're rolling.
Will we send those?
So you're,
Okay, welcome everyone to the, if we can get our name straight.
Shuffle the deck.
It's just been a power play at the Selectmen.
let's put your names in front of the right people.
Welcome everyone to the Tuesday, February 18th, 2020, regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting as a joint meeting with the Wenham Finance Committee and the Superintendent and the School Committee and everyone else who wants to join us. And we only have one item on the agenda, which is the budget discussion with the Finance Advisory Committee over the override structure. I want to remind everyone that it's up to the Board of Selectmen to decide the overall structure of the votes on the town meeting, but we'd like the advice of the Finance Advisory Committee and obviously the input from the schools, which is why they're here tonight. Okie dokie.
Thank you.
Okie dokie.
Can I just call the meeting to order if
Sure.
has anyone already called it? Okay.
No,
No, you just did
Fincom.
Selectmen.
Fincom. Thank you. Sorry for running late. I'll just call the Fincom meeting to order. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to start tonight with a presentation by the Superintendent of Schools, who's here this evening. And Vinny is also here this evening, too. I don't know if we're going to tag team it, but, all right.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. We're really excited for the opportunity to answer any questions that you all may have about the school budget and to hear your thoughts about how the override may be structured. So Vinny is here tonight. I pulled him off a vacation to be here, so I just want to thank Vinny for being here and did not mean to not include him on the front slide here. He just surprised me.
It's raining anyway, you know.
So I'll start by outlining a bit for you our budget goals. You've probably seen this if you've watched any of our school committee presentations. We've really tried to share the message consistently through a variety of different ways. So you've probably seen or heard this before, but we think it's really important to always approach each conversation as if there will be folks who are joining for the first time. So we'll provide a bit of overview before we answer questions. So we had several goals for the tentative budget process, which, as you know, the tentative budget was the leadership team's recommendation. We knew all along that when we presented the tentative budget that there were going to have to be some reductions before final reading. As there have been. But we went into that process looking to develop a needs-based, student-centered, fiscally responsible budget. Might seem like that's a given and not necessarily needed to be stated, but for our leadership team, this really was a whole new approach to collaboratively developing the budget and really looking at not just what was budgeted last year, but really what are the needs of our students? What do we know they need now? We also wanted to prioritize the resources by looking at the whole organization with the whole leadership team, pre-K through 12. We also had a goal to provide the required and appropriate services based on student needs in order to encourage the best possible educational outcomes for all. Again, really asking ourselves, what do we know about our current student needs and what do we know about our projected student needs? We have a demand to respond to the increasing enrollment at pre-K and 1. We also were looking to maintain existing programs and ensure student safety. Expanding our early intervention and supports was a priority for us because, as you've heard me say many times, we know that it's much more cost effective to intervene earlier. And we know that when it comes to early childhood education, specifically preschool, the return on investment can be upwards of, $9 for every dollar spent. And then, of course, continue to support our most valuable resources, our 300-plus employees. I believe that we're probably the largest employer in both towns in our community. We've also had several challenges in developing this FY21 budget that I'll let Vinny talk about.
So some of the challenges we faced this year was the FY20 deficit. These unbudgeted needs has led us to a 2.3% increase over FY20. Some of these things include our contractual obligations, which required a 4.9% increase. This includes items like our COLA, our step increases. In addition to that, we had an increase in our pre-K through 1 enrollment. This has caused the need for a unbudgeted 7th kindergarten class as well as a third unbudgeted pre-K class. With the pre-K class, along with the teacher, also comes 2 teaching assistants. In addition to that, we're always increasing the developmental and social, emotional, and behavioral needs of all students. And as most of you heard, our aging facilities also require an increase in routine maintenance, and we continue to have more investments and needs that we are unable to support. Yep, so this is our FY21 budget overview. The top line is our total operating expenses, and for FY21, we are proposing a $38 million budget, which is an approximately 9.57% increase, and this is just in the operating line. In addition to that, we've seen an increase in our expense offset. This is mainly due to the increased pre-K classroom. We do charge tuition, so as we opened a third classroom, so did the increase in revenues. In addition to that, we're seeing a 7.7% increase in our revenues. This is mainly due to the increase in Chapter 70 and state aid. So to take the operating budget, you subtract your expense offsets and your revenues, and this is what leaves our net operating budget, which is what develops the town assessment, and we are seeing an increase of approximately 8.57%.
And so
And that's serving how many students?
we have about 1,874 students, I believe, the last time I counted.
1874, thank you.
Yep.
Yep. That includes choice in as well.
How many was that last year?
Last year, I believe we were about 50 students less.
Less. Yeah.
So we have a slight increase this year. So one of the questions that we keep being asked is, well, first being told that this isn't sustainable, which we fully understand, and we know that to be true on the school side of the budget as well. One of the questions is, well, if this year is an 8.5%, what's next year going to be? Is this the new normal? How can we expect our communities to sustain this? And we're an attempt to try to help you understand that we do not anticipate this to be the new normal. We wanted to show you what the current reality actually is. So as you know, on July 18th, we received notification that the school department was projecting a $608,000 deficit. That was due to some of those unbudgeted things that Vinny spoke to earlier, the pre-K, the kindergarten class. It also included about $400,000 of unbudgeted student tuitions. This was for students who needed to be placed out of district, but the monies were not budgeted in the FY20 budget that you all approved last April. So although you approved a 5.6% increase over FY19, as shown here, the reality of what we're living every day, and actually we're living since day one of the FY20 fiscal year, is that the budget approved at $29.1 million wasn't going to meet the needs of our students. We really needed $30.3 million in order to meet the known needs. So that would have actually been a 10.55% increase over the FY19 approved budget. So that's where that number's coming from. Of course, just because it's a new fiscal year, those needs don't go away. All of those kindergarten students that required a 7th kindergarten class are now going to go to 1st grade, where we only have 6 classes. So of course that 7th teacher is going to have to follow those students up to 1st grade unless we were to start making class sizes of 24, 25, right? The same is true with the 3rd pre-K classroom. We know that we have incoming students who, as soon as they turn age 3, no matter what time during the school year they turn age 3, if they need those early intervention services, we're required to provide them. And so that's why we had to open that 3rd preschool classroom in November. That 3rd preschool classroom has a lot of 3-year-olds in it who will also need preschool next year when they turn 4. And so the attempt here with this slide, it doesn't change the bottom line, but it does hopefully help give you some confidence in the way that we're planning and budgeting and prioritizing our needs. Because had we had the actual budget that we needed in FY20, the percent change over the FY20 approved would have been 4.36%. And so for those who are looking for some glimmer of confidence into like what is next year going to bring, it's hard for me to stand here and promise you things, partly because I don't know that I'll be here next year, so I certainly wouldn't want to make promises I couldn't personally deliver on. But the other part is that, you know, we are a human business serving humans, and lots of things change throughout the year. There's lots of volatility every school year. And the one thing that we've tried to do in this FY21 budget is make sure that we're budgeting for all of the known unknowns. So these are the students who already are here, who we know have specialized needs or require individualized programs, and we're making sure that we're creating those programs right here within our district so that we can keep more students in district, which is always more cost efficient and I believe always more educationally sound for the student. So I'll kind of pause here and answer any questions. This is really the point I wanted to drive home, was that the reason our budget is such a big ask this year is because we're trying to fill the deficit, because those needs still exist, and that's leading to the larger increase by maintaining what would be a level service budget. It just happens to have a significant increase because that wasn't appropriately budgeted in FY20. And then also preparing adequately for the projected needs that we know about today.
May I? So just two big picture questions, because I think we've all, at least I feel like I've seen a lot of the numbers, that I haven't either just occurred to me or I haven't thought to ask before. So I think at this point, we're sort of looking to the future, as you brought out. I think the increases in pre-K and kindergarten have been, for the past few years, somewhat unexpected, which, how can you expect it? Especially since our enrollment projections, the NASDAQ projections, don't, my opinion, don't really look at that. You know, they use calculations, how many people were born, and then therefore 5 years later enter the school district. Are we doing anything in this budget, I guess, to better understand those really young kids that maybe just have moved in? I see them everywhere, and I doubt they were born, you know, here. So that's my first question, so that we can better understand and plan for the increased.
Yeah, so one of the things that's in our capital budget, which we'll talk about a little bit, is some monies to do an elementary education plan, which will also allow us to do a more in-depth demographic study. I've reviewed the demographic study that was done a few years ago, and one of the tricky things about those studies is that they have a shelf life of about 4 years, because then new babies are born, but also the thing that when they're done well, and in my experience, I've partnered with a woman who does this very, very well, is that they also work really closely with the town to understand the housing turnover rates, to understand if there's any properties currently under construction, who are they designed for, what's the likelihood that a family would move into them, and really looking at that sort of bedroom to student ratio, in addition to looking at birth rates, which don't necessarily for us always predict that, because when we look at trends of when do families move in, it's typically when their children are close to school age or about school age, the ones who are going to move in with school age children. So we'd really want to study the patterns and trends that are unique to Wenham and then also unique to Hamilton in order to come up with an accurate count. The other thing I like to do is track the enrollment every single month against those studies to see how accurate they are. And it, you know, in my past experience, it was about on year 3 when I started noticing, because we had the same story, declining enrollment, but I'm looking around and saying, doesn't look like declining enrollment. There's children, more and more children coming. And we had the same challenge. It was in those early grades. So even though our overall enrollment number might have gone down, it was really surging at the elementary, kindergarten, first, second grades. And so that's why it's really important that we don't just look at that whole number of students, but that we're breaking it down by grade level, by school, and we're tracking it month to month so we can see sort of what the trends are.
And I think to what you said, most importantly, is to go beyond the data that you can get on a chart or find in a census. Because I think that is what, I feel like that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
We've got a mindset, all of us, on decreasing enrollment. And that's probably not the mindset we should be in. So the second question, and I think I've asked this before, so we talk about the deficit that you sort of inherited, which made up of out-of-district tuitions and staff and transportation stuff.
Sure.
By the end of this fiscal year, will that entire, what did you say, $608,000 deficit be eliminated through the various either circuit breaker funds or I call them cuts, or we used to call curtailments. Thank you.
Curtailments.
That's a new word for me.
Different than a cut.
Well, we used to call them budget freezes, but anyway,
That's different.
curtailments.
Yeah.
Will that entire 600,000, will we go into next year starting at zero, or are we carrying over a deficit into next year?
So our latest projection, which was done
As of December 31st.
as of December 31st, showed that we will be in the black, so to speak, at the end of the school year. But with that being said, remember what I said in the very beginning, it's human business serving humans. Anything could happen. There's still a lot of school left. But we're hopeful that between the curtailment, which was able to generate about $200,000 in deferred spending or savings, if you will, folks still have access to that if an emergency arises or if there's a critical student need. You know, that's the difference between a freeze. Typically a freeze is there's no spending. We are still spending and meeting our daily needs, knowing that that money is over here in like a quote unquote savings account, if you will, and hopes to be able to fill that deficit. But if we need it, it's there. So it just depends, right? It depends on what happens. The other part that we're really relying on is the amount of money that we have in our circuit breaker reserve. So between those two things and really smart spending from now to the end of the year, our hope is that we will be able to fill that gap completely.
Great, thank you.
And really, we'll have to make that decision in the next few weeks, looking at the next quarter forecast, because we have to go, if we have to go into E&D, we'll have to get voter approval,
Right.
from my understanding, in order to access those funds, so,
For this year, yeah. that
For
one,
this
I'm
year.
sure, yeah.
right.
Okay, thank you.
So we're trying to manage the deficit as best we can, and we're hopeful.
But we will use most of our circuit breaker reserves at the end of this year.
Which are last year's reimbursements, right? So next year, going into FY '21, will there be new money there, or?
Correct. You get reimbursed the following year for
Right.
your expenses in the prior year.
So it's
So it'll be
not as if we had an
FY19.
extra, student move into the town that was an out-of-district placement, we'd be, going back to a town meeting necessarily, because there will be some reserves available for next year. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Just, it's not based on FY '20, it'll be based on FY '19.
Right.
And then it's a percent of the cost.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Any other questions about this?
If the overall enrollment is declining, but it's growing in the kindergarten area, where is it declining?
At the high school, is
How is
where I
that-
see it.
How is class size affected by, how is the budget affected by that?
So the tricky thing about high school scheduling is it's not as easy as elementary or even middle school. Elementary, you have 120 kids, you divide that by 6 classes, you have 20 kids in a class. At high school, because students need to have meet a variety of graduation requirements, it's not as simple as, oh, well, if we have less kids, we should be able to have less teachers, because we have to look at the number of courses that we need to offer in order for freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors to meet the graduation requirements. But we'll know better if there are any cost savings and or if any positions will be able to be reallocated or eliminated once students actually sign up for classes. And so that starts very shortly after we come back from this February break.
So how much is the high school enrollment declining? Percentage-wise or number-wise or any-wise?
So I'll show you a resource really quickly if I can just hop on the internet and you can be patient with me. Because enrollment to me is something that you need to take some time to kind of,
Oh, I know him.
We had to watch the news, we had to watch Apple TV when we go to school.
He was superintendent.
That'll be good for enrollment.
all right, so let's just get to our website. And then if you go over up here to district info, and you scroll down here to superintendent, you can take a look under reports. And then there's an enrollment report that's right here. You can see live updates as we're filling it in. Each month, we fill it in at the first of the month. And so this shows you this year from August till now. So you can see at the high school, what we have is we have much smaller class sizes than we do coming up from 6th, 7th grade. The 5th graders, if you were to add them up, I think we have 135 5th graders coming up. So the middle school itself's enrollment is going to go up as that smaller 8th grade class bumps up to the high school. But then we're losing a larger, not significantly larger, but a little bit larger class size as these seniors graduate out. So this is one way you can look at it, grade by grade, month by month, school by school, and it shows you our total enrollment. So pretty stable throughout the year, plus or minus a few kids. Now, this doesn't mean that, oh, we have 3 more kids than we did in August, because it could be 10 kids that moved out and 13 kids that moved in. So this doesn't give you all of that detail, but you can see sort of bottom line, school by school. And then this is our October 1 enrollment that we report to the state. So this is really enlightening if you were to just look at year over year, how has our enrollment changed? So not too long ago, we had 608 students at the high school. Last year, October 1, we had 550. So about 58 less students. And really, you can start to tell the story by looking back, and I'll just use 6th grade because it's all added up for you. You know, these 6th graders became 7th graders, and then in this year they became 8th graders, and then in this year they became 9th graders, and then they became 10th graders. So you can kind of see what's our attrition rate in a cohort over the grades. That's one of the things we're currently studying, like how many students do we lose from 5th to 6th grade during that transition for a variety of reasons. And then it seems like, again, you know, there's this kind of attrition rate between middle school and high school. So we need to really understand why. Are students choicing out? Are these kids who are going to go to a private school like since birth? That's their family value, that's their path. Is there something we should be doing different to attract or retain more students? And then also we look at, well, who of these students are choice students? So if you were to look back at our choice enrollment, we were choicing in about 19 kids per grade for the last 5 years or so. But this year, in grade 6, we only have 6 choice students because we had that many more of our own students that were filling those seats. That's a big difference, right? Because choice in is also a revenue stream. We get about $5,000 per kid that choices in. And then in 7th grade this year, we only have 7 7th graders. And then 8th grade, we have 19, right? So then right now, the only students we're choicing into the middle school, because that enrollment is much higher, those class sizes are much higher, are students who have siblings who are already choice students at the high school or middle school. So we're really limited in who we can welcome in at the middle school because our class sizes are getting larger. And then the theory is that as they work their way through, we'll retain them as Hamilton Wenham Regional High School students, and our enrollment will go back up in that way.
Question, I used to know all the numbers, but I'm not quite as up to date as I used to be. Choice, how many new students come into the system each year under choice?
So it depends how many seats we have.
Approximately.
Yeah.
You know, right?
Well, last year we had 100, and this 100 total, and this year we have 67. So again, that just means we have more of our own students, if you will,
So
residents.
it's approximately what it's been in the past.
It's significantly lower.
Or if it's 67, that is low.
It's lower, yeah.
Now, the reimbursement for the choice is still at $5,000?
It's been that way for years, isn't it?
It ranges, but
That's if they don't have a special education increment
But
attached
they
to them.
don't- It hasn't been $5,000 for several years?
It's been
Correct,
that-
yes.
It's been that way as long
I
as
think
can
forever,
remember.
yep. I think since it started.
Even though the cost of the school goes up.
Correct.
1,000 stays the same, and eventually that's not going to be as attractive as it was in the past.
Correct, and that's if they go to a regular public school. If they go to a tech school, it's about 7,000 a student. So depends where they go as well.
Regional vote would be 7,000.
But for Hamilton Wenham, it's still $5,000, it has been for years.
Correct.
Is
Yep.
there anybody doing anything to adjust that to today's standards of educational costs?
At the state level.
right.
That's, okay, so that's Brad Hill and Bruce Tyra.
But that number is not, the 5,000, my recollection, is not meant to offset the cost of every student, because you're, if I'm remembering, or if you're still doing this, you're only bringing in students to a point that would not require
Additional
additional
staffing.
staff.
Correct.
That's why you have that
It's the fill in
variation
the airplane
from.
thing.
Yep, that's why some years we've had 19.
Right.
And that's really been sort of our max number to fill the seats, if you will, to get to like full class size, where in the last 2 years, we've only been able to invite in 6 or 7 students at the middle school level in each grade.
Do you mind just scrolling to the bottom so I can just see the total numbers for the district?
Pretty constant.
So those who have said like the enrollment's declining, that has been the story. It's just that now it's increasing again.
So what was our budget for 2015? Do we have that handy?
2015, I
Right.
don't think we have that.
Or
Right,
2016?
it's in, we actually went back to FY17, right?
Yeah. I can get you that
I think it
number.
was around 30, 31, right?
For FY15, no, it would
The
have,
operating expense budget.
Gross would have been below 30, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
that far back.
we can get
Then
those
you
numbers.
guys would know much better, yeah.
So if we're looking
I
at,
can-
totals, then in the 5 years, it was below 30, now we're approaching 40, right? Looking at 10 mil, give or take, in 5 years.
2,500 a year.
It's 4 years, 27% exactly on the gross operating is the difference.
Per year?
In total, cumulative, of course, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you're using FY15 as a benchmark, if my memory is serving me correctly, I think we had about 24, 25 students placed out of district in FY15, as opposed to this year, we had 55 kids placed out of district. And so, as you know, the cost of educating a student out of district is anywhere from 3 to as much as 5 or 7 times as much it is to educate them in district.
Now, I'm just trying to look timelines, and we know there's that placement, transportation costs and all that. I was just taking an overall view of it because we haven't closed any schools or opened any schools, so I'm just trying to, you don't have to make eye contact, I know.
That's okay, I'm
facing
trying
the
to
wrong-
hear you.
I'm facing the wrong
I
way,
can't hear
sorry.
you, that's
So
all.
I'm just trying to take a look from 2015 to now,
What's driving it?
right? So we have a fairly steady population, it dipped, it went back up, but the operating expense budget itself has gone up 9 or 10 million. To Alex's point, 27.5%.
27, not a half.
Just 27.
Precise.
Okay, thank you.
Come up with
We'll
exact
round down to 27.
All right, that's good, thank you.
Yep,
I have a quick question.
sure.
Do you anticipate, and this, you probably have answered this a dozen times, so I apologize, but do you anticipate, I'm just looking at the major drivers here, the out-of-district tuition, which is up about almost 23+%, and pupil services, which is up 10.5%. Do you anticipate next year that those might level off, given that they're built into this budget? I know it's difficult to project how many new children will come in between now and next academic year who require, but is there any sense of that at all, or is it too soon to?
Well, we are, in this budget, we are able to take 2 big proactive steps that I think will help us retain more students in district and also help us establish more defensible programs. Those are the 2 things we're obligated to do when it comes to student services is create or locate. And almost every single time, it's more cost effective and the programming is more effective if you create it within district rather than locating it out for a whole variety of reasons. So 2 things that this budget allows us to do. One is hire our own board certified behavior analyst. This is called a BCBA in education speak. This is a person who works with students who have self-injurious behaviors or who might have maladaptive behaviors or might just need help regulating, self-regulating. And by having our own person, so this is a great success story within this budget that we can all really champion around and feel good about. Currently, we don't have our own BCBA in the district. We are contracting out for that service at 19 hours per week at anywhere from $130 to $180 an hour. And we only have them for 19 hours a week. So quick math, times that by 180 school days, right? Where we could hire our own board certified behavior analyst who becomes a part of our culture, a part of our team, who we have for 35+ hours a week, who can then work with staff to help them learn skills and strategies to manage these behaviors in the classroom, because we all know 90% of student behavior. It has something to do with the adult around them, right? Might even be higher than that. So we basically, and we're able to reduce our contracted services line. You'll see that in some of our reductions that we made between tentative budget and final reading by about $15,000. And so
Kind of a double learning process, both the student and the adult.
it's both, sure, right, because, I once had a BCBA describe it to me like this, that your attention is a lollipop. Like, the student is going to get that lollipop, and you can either decide whether you're going to reinforce the positive behavior or the negative behavior. And oftentimes, implicitly, we reinforce the negative behavior, which can escalate the behavior. And so it takes an expert watching that interaction to help coach the teacher and the student to avoid that sort of, interaction in the future.
It's like a
And-
negotiator.
It sounds, I'm oversimplifying it for sure, but just again, trying to make it accessible for folks who are like, what in the world is this and why do we need this person? And more, it's becoming really hard to fill these positions because these positions are in such high demand. I mean, if you're looking on School Spring, which is where a lot of the education jobs are posted, it's like BCBA, everybody's looking for these people. So if we're able to recruit and retain someone, we'll be on a great path to adjusting a lot of things that require sometimes out-of-district placements and or other specialized settings for learning. The second thing that we can all feel really good about, we have great success with our elementary language-based program. We're seeing more and more students being diagnosed with specific learning disabilities, some form of dyslexia. There's a variety of forms. We've gotten better at understanding these types of learning disabilities and detecting them early on. I would think even for some of our parents who have students of middle school age, they'll say, we weren't doing this really well 5 years ago. We're getting better at it, which means we're meeting kids' needs earlier, which means that they're able to be more successful earlier on. We have 3 elementary language-based teachers so far, full house. We have 17 students who they are able to serve. And what we're finding is that there's some students who really need a more sub-separate language-based program that's more content-specific, and we don't currently have that. So when that's a need for a student and we sit down at the table to negotiate with families about placement, they're saying, well, you don't have this, so we want to go here where they have it. And that means that our programs aren't defensible because we actually don't have that option for them. In this case, it allows us to say we do have that option, and here's how students access that, or here's the entrance criteria for that program. So those are 2 really powerful, I think, resources that are going to help change the narrative moving forward. Doesn't solve the whole issue, but it's a step in the right direction.
Last year, this time in this process, we had talked about the Hamilton Wenham School District doing strategic planning with the school committee. And I know that there have been the strategic blueprint meetings. And I don't know what the final budget has, but I saw that there was strategic planning dollars in there, and then I think they got taken out, which I understand, because you have to make decisions somewhere. But I guess I just wanted to get an update on where you and the school committee are in that process,
Sure.
and if you hope to continue it and actually finalize a strategic plan.
Yes, so the school committee did approve on January 22nd, I believe, the strategic blueprint, which has 4 large strategic objectives, but also has several strategic initiatives, one of which is expanding to create a more global, community-based guiding coalition. So that's really the next step. And we are well on our way to thinking forward toward that. As a leadership team, we interviewed 3 different potential facilitators because we feel that it's really necessary to have a neutral facilitator so it doesn't become my strategic plan or yours or the teacher's, that it really is something we can all embrace, and it helps chart our path forward. Which is going to become the foundation of all the decisions that we make. That's been one of the hardest things, I think, in this budget
Absolutely,
cycle,
which
is
is
not
why I'm
having
asking. Yeah, right.
that solid foundation. And so we've interviewed 3 facilitators. We narrowed it down to 1 that we liked. We presented this person to the full leadership team. We also invited the 6-12 curriculum leaders and our elementary curriculum coaches to the conversation, again, so we have all this shared commitment to the work that we're doing. And they asked that we consider other facilitators, so we're going to kind of go back out and try to bring a couple more to them. But we believe that with the funds that we've earmarked in the capital budget for that education planning, there's going to have to be a lot of community engagement within that process to make it an authentic and viable process, that we can overlap some of those activities between those two things in order to fund the work, if you will. And then the rest of it is really a lot of internal. Once we get that community input and we pull all that data together and we identify what are our core values, what is going to be our mission statement, and what is our vision, what's the school district we're trying to create, then that's just a lot of man hours, woman hours inside the organization to really develop those action plans that are going to execute on it.
So do you think in like 1 or 2 years, there would be an implementable strategic plan available?
So I believe our strategic blueprint is already implementable because we're doing a lot of the things it says we would do. We will have our goal is to have a draft of our core values to kind of bring back through the staff for opening day on August 24th, and a revised mission and vision statement by January 2021. So it will be a multi-year strategy. I believe we listed it out to 2025, but it's something that's going to be very iterative and constantly updated and expanded upon and communicated out.
And I guess when I say strategic plan, I mean very comprehensive that ties dollars to goals and vision, and then goes out several years, which you mentioned. And I think it's great to get that update because I think it's useful. You inherited a situation, and I've seen the past several years policies kind of change and dollar flows change. If we had a strategic plan, it would help guide some of those decisions that are even more challenging with limited resources.
Yes.
And also as a Fincom member and other people voting, it helps, well, in the communities, it helps see the numbers in a longer term context. You know, I appreciate you're saying that next year it's not expected to be such a high increase, but it just helps to see more years out of what the vision is and what the dollar flow might be associated with that. Granted, it is a human-based undertaking, so it can change, but just to have a general idea. So that's good to hear that that's still.
Well, in 2 of our areas that have been identified as areas in need of, or opportunities in need of improvement, one being our student services department and the other being our elementary literacy programming. Those 2 things are going to have very specific action plans in and of themselves. They're 2 big drivers in this budget, and so just today I was having a meeting with our director of student services, and I asked her to really make a 3-year plan, starting with year 1 being very detailed. What's going to happen in the next 3 months? What are some of the benchmarks? What's some of the ROI that we're going to be seeing that we can really communicate out to the whole community about? And then what's that going to look like in 6 months? That'll get us to like the start of the school year. What's it going to look like just as we're developing the budget for FY22? And then at the end of year 1, what are the things we're going to be able to stand up and communicate back regarding some of the investments that we're making, but also the programmatic enhancements that we're making that aren't necessarily driving the budget, but we're using existing resources to accomplish, like enhancing the physical space of our existing programs and enhancing the data collection within our specific programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. So I'm happy to share more about what this budget allows us to and what's not in the budget. They're all in the slide deck, which I'm sure you all will have access to. You've heard me say these things because I keep saying them, because I really believe that in order for us to get the resources that our students need and our district needs and our students deserve, folks don't have to love the whole budget. I mean, it's going to be hard for everyone to say, I can get behind this whole budget, but there is something in this budget for every student. And my hope is that by really communicating what this allows us to do, it will get folks out to support the school budget. So you don't have to love it all, you just have to love some of it, or one thing, just one thing.
Maybe most of
I
it.
wish to say that about our budget, right? Just, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes. We good, Jack? When you're ready?
Good.
All right. First of all, I just want to thank Chris and Jackie, who've done a lot of work with me on this budget process. Jackie's back there actually working the computer, so if we have some scenario later when you're discussing some options, maybe we could plug some of that in and get you some real-time data. So just to summarize on our meeting from Thursday night, our the capital budget for the operating side, we have $400,351 in total, less the Hamilton assessment of $61,380 is a net of $338,971. As I mentioned on Thursday, most of those items are from reoccurring leases and obligations from prior fiscal years. The revolving fund, $25,000, that's work that was done at the Iron Rail, so that's basically paying back that ban annually. Chapter 90 is money for the Commonwealth for our roads and sidewalks. The water fund, right now, we just have $35,000 for the capital reserve. And after going through that exercise with our capital projects that department has requested, we've identified $164,300 from free cash to those projects. Now, speaking of free cash, our breakdown. So we had total free cash certified by the Department of Revenue of $954,005. Per the financial policy adopted by the Selectmen some time ago, it was to retain $250,000 to replenish the free cash for the next fiscal year. That leaves us with a possible free cash that we can allocate out at $704,005. After we just proposing the $164,300 for the capital items, that leaves us with a balance of $539,705 that we can now allocate to the operating budget. So here's our proposed budget right now that we're working on. So the only difference that from what you've seen in the past is right now we plugged in the $539,705 under free cash within the revenues. That brings us to revenues of $20,560,539. And our expenses and education is in the vocational assessments included with the regional school assessment is $21,656,043, which leaves us the deficit of $1,095,504.07. So just to show how this looks, the town's portion of the budget comes up for FY21 is 45.58%, and I'm looking at that number right there. And the education, the school's share, which again is inclusive of the vocational school, is 54.42. So how that breaks down, so we wanted to just strip out the this town from the schools. So our town side is $9,871,398, which is an increase of 4.64% over last fiscal year. And on the education side, it was $11,784,645, which is an 8.97% increase. So what we wanted to do is just throw around, just for the sake of maybe a starting point for some override options for discussion purposes only. So scenario one is if there was one override article for the entire $1,095,504. Option two is, I call this the forecasting option. If you remember in the beginning, I always said we allocated 3% for the schools. This is how that 3% would roll out. The problem with this article is, this scenario is, we increased by 4.67 and only the school's at 3, but I just wanted to show that. So with that, including our dollar amount and up to 3% of the schools comes to the first override option would be $823,790, and then everything above that, which is 5.97%, would come to $271,714. Another scenario that we came up with from hearing discussions was if we both factored in at if we hold out, if we were at 4.64 and we held the school to that same dollar amount, that percentage at 4.64, that would mean the first override would be for $1,001,145, and everything above that 4.64, which is the 4.33, would be $94,359. So then what we wanted to do is just, how does that affect the tax rate and the tax bill? So, as we said in the past, with a over $1 million override, we're looking at a tax rate of from $18.94 currently to $20.71, which would be an increase on the median assessed house at 500, Chris, 575 roughly?
575, 700.
Thank you. Which means that's an increase of $1,019 per year. So what we just want to do is kind of see on the next two scenarios the same thing. So if we did on option 1 and just this first portion passed, that would be an increase in the tax rate of $20.41 and an override amount of $846. So the difference on that 5.97 is, to bring it up to the 2071, is $173 per year. Now under scenario 3, it's, if they passed an override, the override 1 option at $1,145, that would increase our tax rate up to $20.61, bringing the annual tax bill on the median assessed home at $961. This delta amount right here, or the 4.33%, would be an additional, it would bring the rate up to 2071, but it would only increase the tax bill $58 a year. So,
Anthony, can I
yep,
ask you a question?
sure.
So all the override, there is no scenario, couple questions. There is no scenario that doesn't have an override.
No, these were just scenarios that we,
Why not? Did you not work on one that,
we haven't come up with what would be. So we know that the dollar amount for the school town side is just shy of $500,000, and we haven't come up with a cut list because our budget that we prepared and the department heads prepared was level service. So anything, we just, this is just 3 options. This is not 3.
or options?
It's for discussion tonight. This is just a starting point for the board to consider some options and go from there if they want
Just doing
others.
hypotheticals. okay.
Yeah, that's it.
If I just did the town budget, is there an override with that?
Yes, 400, just shy of
You
$500,000.
just said that.
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. And these items are override 2s, are all school aspects? Or all
That would be the
school?
balance of the, that would, yes, basically be the balance of the school.
All right, so your override 1s are the town and a portion of the school.
Correct.
Override 2 is the school.
Correct.
For this scenario.
Just for these scenarios, and these are by no means final. This was kind of just a discussion point for everybody here tonight.
In scenario 2,
There can be 100 more scenarios.
Yeah, that's true.
in scenario 2, it says 3%. I know you mentioned this earlier, I'm just trying to clarify. It says all town plus schools at 3%. So that's, the town is increased 3%,
Town's increase still at the 4.64.
so that, so 88,23790 is the town at 4.64%
And the school is only at
3%?
3.
So there's only school, I think you just said that, I just want to make sure I understand this. There's only school money in that 271.
Correct.
Okay.
Did you run scenarios with the leaf pickup?
We didn't, we talked about,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
So,
Because
after
last week
thinking,
we were-
after thinking long and hard about the leaf pickup,
Yeah.
we decided to make it a special override. Like, we're proposing a special override.
A separate warrant. you mean.
Separate warrant, and so, you want the leaf pickup? Fine, it's gonna cost roughly $45,000. You don't, there's no extra money for that. Instead of mucking around in town floor for an hour about people getting up on the thing, and that, the podium, and the microphone, and suggesting they want leaf pickup, they don't want whatever. So, we wanna carve that out, and let a separate vote from the town. It's controversial enough so that I think it deserves its own little discussion.
So the budget that we have that is creating the $1 million override does or does not have leaf pickup in it? Loose
Does-
leaf pickup.
None of these scenarios include leaf pickup
Okay.
right now.
So the notion would be to have this, and then if, sort of an add-on warrant that says, this is, okay. And do we know that it's 45,000? Last time we had a lot of discussion about it.
Yeah, Bill is meeting on Thursday with Weston and Sampson to determine really what the cost of the MS4 additional permitting would be if they were to do all the work. So hopefully by Thursday, we'll have some more information on that.
We have from Bill Tax is 45.
Right,
It's around there, if it's not exactly.
right.
I think I heard something like up to 90,000 last week. That's why I just wanted to be sure.
I heard that.
I wanted to make sure we were using a final number, whatever the number is, just make sure that we. have a
Well, I
final
think
number.
the 90 was MS4 permitting number. I think the 45 was loose leaf, I think. If we did the MS4 permitting contracted, it could be potentially up to 90,000. If we did it in-house, is estimating the savings around 40, to 45. I think that is the difference there, from my understanding.
That's where it gets confusing to me.
Yes.
Because this budget assumes no loose leaf pickup and
And
MS4 work being done in-house.
In-house.
It'd be bag pickup.
Bag pickup, no loose leaf.
That
And-
bag,
Right.
Right, and the
That-
I'm sorry.
that would be still in the loose leaf article, so we'd have to incorporate the $12,000.
This includes no bag or
We didn't put the bag in there right now either. That would be included in the loose leaf article.
Right.
So a budget, so if the town meeting decided it wanted loose leaf pickup, the DPW would continue doing the loose leaf pickup, but then we would have to pay to outsource MS4. So that cost would be more than 45,000.
We won't know the number
Supposedly.
till, we won't know the number till Thursday, really.
Well, that's just the distinction I wanted to make.
Yes, but
It's
you're-
not
you're-
45,000. It's not an override necessarily of 45, because the override would be a contract, an outside contract. The override would pay for an outside contract so that our DPW.
Or some combination thereof, where we can do some work inside and some work would have to be done by Weston and Sampson. We just don't know the level of detail yet till Thursday.
That number has to be refined.
Right.
Yeah, soon. Especially if we're going to make it a separate article.
For months, but, so I think that one way or the other, we should have a separate article. The town, they want to spend the money to do it, fine, if not,
Yeah,
can
keep it
save some
simple.
money. But simple, we haven't nailed down the number apparently, as Anthony just described. Go ahead.
That's all we really had now. It's just for discussions. If the other scenarios, we can always go back and run other ones as well. Those was just kind of a starting point, and I can leave them up there. Just,
What happened to the line items that we had at last week's meeting, where we cut out, the rifle issue, we cut out.
Shotguns, right.
Sorry, shotguns, long-range planning, et cetera. There was a number of items that we adjusted.
so that brought that, right over here, this 164,000, John. This number, last week's presentation was another 100 and, anybody, Chris, you remember?
15,000.
115, somewhere around there, higher. So we were looking at, originally, that was like, I think, around 300,000, give or take.
So now it's 164.
Now it's 164, which means that much more free cash can go to the,
That's the figure that's in the budget that you had
correct.
in the prior stream.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So are we discussing scenarios now, Jack? Or we-
Yeah, so I mean, fundamentally, we have, there's lots of different iterations. One scenario is, I think the school superintendent is recommending this, hello, and that,
What
for
is the
one
price?
override for the town, is that right? I've heard that? Okay, the answer is yes. That's one scenario. We have one big override, there you go, up or down. Another scenario, another type of scenario, not going anyone specifically, is we have two, actually three overrides. One, the leaf by talked about that a minute ago, and that we should have that in any event. The other is, have an override for the schools and an override for the town. And so that, I personally believe we should give the voters a choice. So if they don't like the town budget and think we haven't done a good enough job, go back and cut some more, and that, do whatever. Similarly for the schools, and that, on the other hand, that they are accepting the explanations we give on the floor with the eloquence of the school superintendent, or whoever's gonna give it. I think it's, and our team here, they accept that, then we have 2 overrides that pass, and that, depending on the LEAF one, maybe 3. So I think that those are the 2 basic choices I think we have, and that, which we haven't, the Board of Selectmen hasn't deliberated on yet. It may not be till tonight
Well,
either.
since we have the FinCom here, I have my thoughts, but we're not gonna have them after this. I'd be interested if they have
Yeah.
an opinion.
I think,
May or may not sway my opinion, but.
Before they,
like to hear it.
any questions of what I just described?
So
Okay.
you said level fund both the school and the town, and then do an override for each? So one override for the town funds and one override for school funds?
Right.
Is that, am I understanding that
That's
correctly?
an option, that's one
Okay.
option.
Okay.
Yeah. Separate the amounts of the override into 2 buckets, and that, again, 3 buckets, one for the LEAF, put the LEAF business
Sure,
aside.
right.
Depending on whether it's 45,000, 50,000, whatever the actual number's gonna be, it's in that ballpark. But rather than not having Article 1, if it's still Article 1, take an hour to go over LEAF, let's have it, separate later on, so that, instead of mucking up the whole Article 1. So anyway, so that's fundamental choices. I don't think there are scenarios where we can have 3 or 4 overrides, or forget the LEAF, but that's what we have. And I understand, I'm told anyway, the school committee or superintendent or both are recommending to us, is that true, that you prefer 1 override?
Can I
You can just say yes or no.
Well,
So, no, but maybe yes. So, I'm not
That's
speaking
really
for,
clear. Why don't you say that again for the
Dr.
camera?
Kuchenberger, can you go back up to the podium, because I'm gonna get 20 emails about this tomorrow.
I just want to
couldn't
be
hear. What
clear
did
that
she
I don't
say?
have the authority to speak for the school committee. And so what I was saying to the town administrator was that I think option 2 and option 3 are both unnecessarily divisive. It would, to me, the rationale for scenario 2 doesn't really make sense. When we spoke initially back in November, we talked about the schools coming in between 5 and 7, knowing, Alex, I think you're the one who said that, knowing that that will be particularly challenging given our deficit. With that being said, I think scenario 1 is the most inclusive. We are one community. I think it's really important that we embrace this challenge together and we come together, given the challenges of the fiscal reality. I worry about scenario 2 and 3 dividing the town and the schools further. I certainly wouldn't want the perception to be that either scenario 2 or 3, that's somehow nice to have for the schools. Our needs are our needs, and so if the schools are causing an override, I would like to put all of our needs in one bucket, so then we can hear specifically from the voters on what they're able to support, and then if not, we have more work to do, of course. But if you were asking me my preference, it would be scenario 1. I think it's
You
healthiest.
actually voted on that, by the way?
They have not voted on an override structure. It's not really their role to do that.
They can make a recommendation.
Sure, I mean, I can bring that
No,
back to the
I'm asking-
Capitol.
They have not.
They're not here
They've
to
never
do
done
so.
Well, and they have not.
No one has heard this yet.
Not
They
deliberated.
can meet tomorrow night.
Yeah, but I mean, is it my understanding, they have not really deliberated on, your opinion that you just gave us is your opinion?
Is my opinion, yes.
Oh,
They,
not the school committee.
no, we have, I think it's
Might
helpful
be.
for us to understand what the scenarios are first. And honestly, I wasn't really fully understanding what scenario 2 and 3 would be, so it's been helpful for me to be here tonight,
They're
but.
just examples.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, it's 1 override, forget the LEAF, or 2. I mean, one way or the other, however you divide up the amount of money in each override.
Yeah,
Those are the selectmen's choice.
Yeah.
That's what we have to decide.
yes.
Probably not tonight.
So
Thank you.
it seems to me that the school budget is a significant portion of our budget and our expenses.
Yeah.
And historically, I don't think I'm wrong, but I might be. We've always had a distinct discussion for the town operations and the school operations,
Right.
That's right.
so that the community could look at what's driving the school budget, what's driving the town budget, and go back and forth with that. I could support override one, I suppose, if there was a distinct discussion on the floor about the budget at town meeting. In other words, here are the school budget costs, here are the town costs, this is how it rolls up into the $1.1 million. If that is not as clear, I think what we have to, speaking for myself, I think what we have to be really kind of focused on is how the community at town meeting floor understands these numbers and what drives them.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I am at this point.
I'll opine, and thanks, Chris and Anthony. I would, 2 and 3 are confusing, so I know we can have 1 through 99 and have, I think 1 or the 2 Jack mentioned is the way to go. We've always had it separately in years past. This is my 3rd year, but going back, I think you checked back to 91,
We've had an
92.
operational override, that's the
It's a-
difference of town one.
The one devil's advocate to the 2, and a lot of the town doesn't realize this, we don't set the precedent, it doesn't pass unless they vote. But if the town itself override doesn't go through, we don't have much to cut, right?
Right.
We need, of any year.
What we do, it's just gonna be much more painful.
And, fire trucks, police, there's some things we can't, we're so thin right now. I'll say this, the right thing to do is to have the 2 separate warrants, because that's what we've always done. For ease of moving the town through, and not having to cut any more services or cut lots of capital and roofs and things like that, is to have scenario 1.
The difficulty of having one scenario, one overrides, well, okay, let's say it doesn't pass. Well,
For what reason? Oh, sorry.
That's a good point, so
Well,
for any
do we just
reason.
say to schools, all right, we're short $1 million, you cut half, we'll cut, so how do you go about doing that? So if the school budget passes, the override passes, good, they're all set, at least the town is not set, but, and the town override doesn't go through, we know we have work to do on the town side. If the whole thing doesn't pass, we don't know, how do we divide up?
To Jack's point,
Come back to-
we don't control half of the budget. It's controlled by another party altogether. It's the superintendent's budget. And we have no say in that. We can opine all day long, we can beg and plead and say, let's do it, but,
And some of us who've been around a long time, like Jim, we've known about issues like this. It was 12, 13, 14 years ago when the school budget didn't pass, and then it passed again, and we all got together in the school
2003.
auditorium, and that, we had a 2-town meeting, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole protocol of what happens if the school budget doesn't pass, as you, Jim, I'm sure recall. There's no such thing with the town. If it doesn't pass, we gotta go back and cut.
fix that
Just one other observation, and this is, again, my observation, not reflecting. You mentioned the divisiveness. I've been to, I think, almost every town meeting. I haven't felt a sense of divisiveness about schools, towns, at least on town meeting floor. I'm sure there's some of it that exists, But I think what drives it is a good discussion about what are the needs, what are the issues, and how are we gonna pay for it. But I haven't felt that. Maybe I experienced it differently
You
than other
probably did
people.
when you were on the school committee. You probably experienced it when you were on the school
Well, on the
committee.
yeah, sure, but, you come at it from a different perspective then. I'm just talking general town meeting floor.
Right.
It's, I think, by and large, a fairly reasonable discussion, about these
Except if
tough
it doesn't
questions.
pass, what do we do? That's my question.
Well,
so
I mean, if it's one,
Well,
scenario
to
one.
that point,
No,
though.
no, right, exactly.
Jack,
Yeah,
can I ask a
that's
question to that
the-
point? Because it may be germane for the rest of the conversation. So if we chose to have one override, and then it passed or whatever, it goes to a ballot, is it not possible to say that this is $1 million override with X number of dollars for operating costs for the school and X numbers of dollars of operating costs for the town? So if it failed, then it would be clear how much the schools had to cut and how much the town had to cut.
I think once you mix all those numbers in one article, because each article will have this very specific, obviously, dollar amount associated with it, you lose the ability to carve it at one point. And that's what 2 and 3, albeit not well, seek to do, right? They seek to establish I'll call it cap of affordability, which is to say all of town expenses plus some amount of schools. And I think 2 does so unfairly, and 3 hints at maybe something a little bit more equitable. But once they're all in one, I don't know how you would attribute a dollar amount of that increase, because you have to go over some kind of arbitrary threshold, which has been 3%.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure I said 5 or 7 would be great. I think historically I said that we're in that range, 5+.
And then again, back to my point, is that with the town budget, we have a line item veto opportunity. Hold, let's cut this. That can happen, or increase it. We have absolutely no control over the school budget. So whatever it is, and I'm not sure how you can split that baby
Do we have line item veto on a town override article? Because in my experiences, I've lived here, we've never had a town override with town expenses. So when we talk about an override, so this, I don't recall one. People have been here as long as I have. Yeah, so the overrides that we've had year after year after year have been school overrides, and the school has identified things that they would cut if the override didn't pass. We have a little bit different scenario this year in that we can't fund our town increases. I mean, this is an override for town expenses as well as school, which is some of the
Other than
confusion.
special things like a fire truck or something like that.
Something outside.
Yeah.
Like debt service reserve.
Capital.
A capital operating, no.
Yeah,
I
so,
don't recall anything about it.
right.
I've been around longer.
Never.
right.
No.
So the override will just be an override for the towns. And hopefully, and this would hopefully be true of the schools if we are at an override, that it would be clear to folks, okay, if this override town school, however, doesn't pass, this is how much money it is and this is what we're going to lose. This is what's at stake, I guess. So I think it's what we've not done in the schools in the past several years is say, okay, it's a $330,000 override for the schools. Okay, well, what if this doesn't pass? What does that cost? What will the schools not be able to do specifically that add up to $331,000? And you know,
There's a whole, as I said a minute ago, there's a whole protocol.
no, but let me finish, Jack. So people will vote, and they've been asked to vote for an override for the schools,
Right.
having no idea what would be cut if that passed. And to me, that's
If it didn't
not,
pass.
if it didn't pass. And that's unfair for a voter, I think, because I would like to be able to say, oh, wow, those are things that on that override, school or town, that are identified and are important to me, so I'm going to vote for that.
This is going on for
Well,
years like this.
That's
There's
been
nothing different
the,
about
yes,
this.
it
There's
is.
nothing different about this in the last 15 years.
That is not true, Jack. The lack
We've had
of,
school overrides many, many years, haven't we?
Jack,
And
I was on the, yes,
yes,
but
and
every
the schools
year,
ever come up and say, if we don't get it, this is what we're gonna cut?
absolutely, the 10 overrides that I was personally involved with, we agonized and had a list, and I can probably show them to you if I haven't shredded them by now, of everything that would not happen if that school override didn't
And
pass.
sometimes okay.
So, to your point, since I've been on Fincom, I think I'm in my 3rd budget season, the prior administration and school committee did not provide what we
Correct.
would call Plan B. If
Correct.
anyone wants to go back and watch that.
The last 5 years.
Yes, and that would be what would happen if the override doesn't pass, what gets cut. And we had asked for that information just for full transparency, and there were different reasons given in the 2 prior budget seasons I've been in of why that wasn't provided. So I guess, in my opinion, we don't know if that would be provided or not this year because it's new school committee members, new district staff. So I just don't want to assume that Plan B wouldn't be provided, because I don't,
No, I think that's a
Oh.
question we're going to have to ask
Yeah.
if we get to the.
I think
to-
in part, it's already been provided in a prior meeting, the red, yellow, green, orange
right,
Yeah.
degree of cuts
There's
was
a list.
delineated with some precision
yeah.
to get from 12.5 to varying percentage increases below. So
Yeah, and
there's been an attempt to
there's
portray
been,
that.
and my perception, as you just pointed out, is that there has been a lot more transparency in this process than prior years, because when we explicitly asked for that information, we were told no. So I just don't want to assume that we wouldn't have Plan B.
No, that was why I
Yeah.
brought it up. I would
Right.
hope, and I would hope also for the towns that we
Which is
would have
helpful.
Plan B for the town.
Yeah, and I think some of the concern in the prior years is that, oh, we don't want to offer Plan B, or what would be cut if the override doesn't go through, because it's going to work against the school budget, but it could also work in favor of people voting for the override when families and residents see what they're not going to get if the override doesn't go through.
We should do that for the town too, then.
Yeah.
Right?
I think
Yeah.
so.
So if we did go the two options, we could ask the schools to provide what you just discussed, and they could either do it or not, the school committee, and that either can
Provide
provide it or not.
Plan B.
And that, it's okay, I don't know.
I just don't know where you draw the line if there are two. I get the concept and it makes sense. I just don't know where you would draw the line.
We have to talk about that a lot more.
Yeah,
So we want
Yeah.
to be fair.
yeah,
The whole point is to be fair.
right,
It's
and
not to
clear.
basically think, oh, let's fund the town and everybody else.
Well,
part of the schools.
and clear.
We don't want to do that, although I think we did that last year, we don't want to do that again, and that's not fair. So but we didn't think long and hard about that. We're trying to think much more this year about that, so that we should be fair, and it should be perceived as fair as well. What that is, we can come up with, David said 99 scenarios, but we have to, these are just Anthony's scenarios. This is, I'm seeing this for the first time as well, so that,
Good to have a jumping off point to talk about.
yeah. But fundamentally, we, the board has to decide whether we're gonna have one overall override. Again, I'll leave business to a side, or two. So that, I'm recommending not specifically which two, but we have two, and that, one for the schools and one for the town.
And I have a question about, and it may be in here, I'm not finding the numbers right now. If we have two overrides, one for the town and one for the school, what are we going to assume the baseline is
We haven't figured that out yet.
with, what would the rate of increase be from FY '20 to FY '21? Are we assuming like a 3% increase? And then do you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to figure out what the baseline would be, so then what the override amount would be.
I just said a minute ago, we haven't discussed that.
Well,
That needs to require more discussion. I understand where you're going with it. Do we?
Oh, I don't know where I'm going with it. I'm just asking a question about what a baseline is.
I said, we don't know. It's a judgment. Should we make it 3, 3.5, 4? It should be the same as the towns? Should be higher, lower, what? That's a separate discussion,
No, I think
which we haven't had.
Well, it's,
They're asking what without the override, we would be at -5 compared to.
well, like if we have a level services budget,
Which
and
is
then
what-
the overage is the override,
Mm.
what are we assuming in the level services budget for a rate of increase from FY '20 to FY '21?
Like you did last year. It's like what we did last year.
Because-
Those are certain-
So that's my question. I don't have those numbers in front of me. What would the assumption be of the increase in level services from '20 to '21?
So the town's level services was at 4.67. That was level services, and some of those drivers was really not new growth, other than the big factors are healthcare,
And is that in prior,
trash.
is that in prior documents somewhere that you probably have given us? I just don't have them with me.
We've talked about a lot, maybe.
Okay.
It doesn't include a lot of the capital.
To
The
that
level services
Right.
won't include a lot of the
Capital's
capital.
over and above.
Right, capital's over and above.
Right.
Yeah.
so is there such a thing as two town school or a town override and a school override? So that an override would only have town things, and you're imagining a second, so only town things in the first override and only school things in the second override? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So the Article 1 budget might have school and town things in, but the override would separate.
Yes, I guess so.
Well, you could have 3 articles. I mean, Article 1 is for your town to be level service. Level 2 is an override for the town over 3. No, I take that back. You still have to include the school, so. Yeah, then the whole school would have to be an override,
Yeah,
then, would it?
previously,
Yeah.
Article 1
Yeah,
included both
sorry.
the town and schools,
Yeah.
without overrides. And that, and if there was an override request, historically, it's only been the schools that asked for an override, not the town.
Can I ask a question on scenario 2? The-
This one.
No.
I'm sorry?
No, that was, excuse me, Malcolm.
Okay, thank you. If you get the town, last year, the school was given a budget. The school overran their budget, okay? So, for scenario 2, if you went this scenario, this still doesn't help you in any of your listing of things that you need or want. You wouldn't get to I guess I'm cautious in terms of how I'm trying to say these things. You had a budget and you call it reality. No offense, ma'am, you overran your budget. So the concern is, so you overran it, but if you're only getting a 3%, so I'm only talking at 823, option 1. So let's just say that passed. That still puts you in the hole. Yeah. You still need, you still need another override to cover your costs.
I mean, the budget's been approved by the school committee, so the sum total of all overrides, our levy limit and our override articles need to fully fund everything.
Okay.
It's whether or not you segment out any parts of it. Other than that, any piece falls flat, as it did last year on town meeting floor. That the budget was failed at
Maybe
town
my
meeting.
real question is, will you overrun the budget again? Sorry, I hate to be, I'm sorry, you forced me to be blunt, so I'm sorry.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I will actually come up here and speak to that.
thank you, ma'am.
So I was hired on July 1.
Mhm.
So I own everything from the day that I'm hired, right?
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You always get blamed for what, yeah.
But I
I'm
think
your predecessor.
the important thing to remember is that we have increasing individualized, specialized student needs. That always gets funded. That's not a choice. It's illegal to not fund it. Not to mention we would never do that because it's not what's right and best for kids. Those things are not going to go away. So whether we have 1 override, we have 2 overrides, 1 override passes, 1 doesn't, the reality of taking care of our kids doesn't change. That still has to happen. I'm not going to stand up here and give you a doomsday scenario. The doors will open. The kids will come. We will do everything we can to meet their needs. What we're trying to do is eliminate exactly what happened in FY20, where we know we have needs and we don't adequately budget for them. Because again, the kids are going to come, right? Even kids we don't know about are going to come. And so what I'm trying to actually do is, and I've called this a correction year because at some point we have to right the ship. But yeah, if we're running in a deficit and then we underfund the schools next year, whether it's through the inability to pass an override or needs that exceed what we've budgeted for, we're still gonna be in that same situation, and that's gonna be a slippery slope until we correct it, right?
Yep.
And so when we know that we have needs and we know that they're going to cost a certain amount of dollars, we should budget for that. Because otherwise, the needs are still going to be there, and we are going to be obligated to meet those needs. If we choose not to meet those needs, there are ramifications of that. That poses a huge liability to the school district and the community. So we're trying to avoid that by adequately budgeting here and being smart about what we know, and then still realizing that there's going to be some things that we don't know, but we're not in a place where we can be that conservative in terms of our budgeting.
Thank you, ma'am.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And that argument, or not argument, that's not an argument, that's a statement of fact.
Yes.
That kind of leads me again to have the discussion, to have a school distinct discussion. Because there are issues that we, and I'm not talking about the budget ownership, but in the school budget, there are issues that we are mandated to respond to.
Special ed.
Special ed, our contracts, our agreements and contracts, right?
English language services.
Health insurance, I mean, you know, those are things that aren't real flexible.
Health
We
and
have the
safety
same thing
issues.
for the town. I mean, you know, we have contracts with the,
No, but
people?
the special ed costs, Jack, this is, number 7 change, is remarkable. And it's not a statement about the school system or anything else, but they're going up from FY '20 to FY '21 by $908,000.
why is that?
And that
Because-
has to be, excuse me, and that has to be, I think, very clearly enunciated at some point in this process.
Well, we have to fund it. I mean, there's no question. If your
That's
point
right,
is-
that's right.
I got it.
Yeah, but
Everyone
I'm
gets
just stating the number is so
It
significant.
could be
it
2
drives-
million, or it could be 500,000. We have to fund it. It's
That's right.
mandated, it's
That's
by the,
right.
it's the law, so on and so forth. I got it.
Yep. Yeah. So one thing I would wonder, like, we're talking a lot about how would we divide it, so I'll just throw a suggestion out there, and you can tell me to go sit down. Anthony. So
having
in a
grandchildren.
previous slide, Anthony showed the breakdown between the town and the school budget, 45.58 and 54.42. I don't know if that's fair to look at the override at that same percentage breakdown or not.
Neither do I. We haven't discussed it. This
Yeah.
is something, the Board of Selectmen is not seeing these slides. We're seeing them the first time.
Percent, okay.
These are simply examples that Anthony's come up with. He was not given instructions of what to do.
But it's an interesting conversation to have.
It certainly provided an interesting conversation.
Well, even to Dr. Kuchenberger's point, using the percentages of town and school is another way to divide up the override. That's not really one of these options.
Say it again?
I think what Dr. Kuchenberger is describing is a way to divide the budget into 2 overrides that might be fair, that's not represented here. So it's like another option.
Which is what?
The 54, it's not on there. but
45,
the
52.
45, the percentage of the total cost that is schools and the percentage of the total cost that is towns.
Okay.
So maybe the town should have that percentage and an override, and the school should have
2
that
years ago, it
percentage.
was 50/50. Yes, okay.
But that's, I think, acknowledging that it's not 50/50 anymore.
Right.
So anyway, I think it's a,
There's no clear-cut, ironclad answer, which is, yes, it's in the judgment call. And I think, I for one, you're a selectman, so is John, we just want to make it fair, but the point is, should we have 2 or 1? That's really the question. However, we divide up the amounts of money in each one, and I'm recommending for the Board of Selectmen to vote, have 2, forget this, leave this, 2 options, one for schools and one for the town, and the amounts to be determined subsequently. Jim, to the allocation.
Can I make a general comment?
Please.
So, just first off, I'd like to recognize Dr. Kuchenberger's job. I think she has inherited a complete fiscal mess at the school, and it's noble of you to say that, oh, you own what was present on day 1. But I could also print off the letter that all of us have received from Vinnie's predecessor, the prior assistant superintendent, who began a 1-page memo with a few short paragraphs stating, "As today is my last day in the office, blah, blah, blah." The next paragraph says, "You'll have a $600,000 shortfall this year," and then it ends with "good luck." So that's a tough welcome to have, and I
Merry
would
Christmas.
And I also think that you speak about the challenges that the regional school district is facing with a lot more familiarity and grasp than someone who's just been on the job since July 1st. You sound like you've been at this
And transparency.
for several years, not a handful of months. And transparency, which is coming not via the school committee per se, as it is in this form, but directly from the administration, which I know we appreciate and have all throughout this process. So the comment I want to make is that we're up against a 9+% tax increase. And I'm not, no, it's not 9 points, it's not 2.5 plus. I'm just putting myself back in the Fincom chair as stewards of our taxpayers, residents' dollars, and going from 1894, where's Chris?
He just said it.
Stepped
You
out.
left the room, you knew.
1894, because I was gonna.
1894.
1894 is where we're at.
9.3.
I'm sorry?
It is 9.3 increase.
Yeah, 9.345, exactly, thanks, Aaron. You know, to an estimated 2071, which never works out exactly where it's going to be. So even if we pass the budget as is, voters, yay, override, market value of the town changes, we all know that. So we all take that with a grain of salt, but it's roughly 9% tax rate increase. Puts us well north of 20, among very few towns and communities in the state that are in that realm. And it's, the question then becomes where, so if this is the right thing to do, where's the end? Is it in sight? Is it near? And so you were left with a $600,000 current fiscal year deficit after rolling in $600,000 in net savings from debt from the $1.7 million middle school expenditure annually with a 1.1 MSBCA, if those are the right acronyms, something like that, MSBA, whatever. Offsets, there's 600 into it. So looking at those numbers and then just going back to 4 years cumulative 27% increase in gross operating. As a taxpayer, we're wondering where does this stop? And I've received questions from residents as to what happens when we hit 25, not if the statutory. And I was actually looking on the BLS today, trying on the website, trying to find the right keywords. Cap property taxes, max property taxes. I couldn't find it, and I'm not an attorney who's well versed in jail. So, and we need to read up on it, and that's an unfortunate reality.
Well, it's not a trajectory either. I mean, a couple of years ago, our tax rate went down purely because of our valuation.
Because of the evaluation increase, but
Right.
of course, the dollars that our residents paid went up meaningfully, right? Yep, exactly.
So, you know, it's hard.
So I just make that general comment. I want to, number one, recognize the superintendent's job that she's done at communicating this expertly, and two, the challenge that we have and that our residents need to understand exactly what's going on. And I feel the transparency that needs to be afforded back to us if they are in favor of one or the other. It doesn't necessarily need to manifest itself in the form of divisiveness, but to Jim's earlier points, residents could have a good handle on, yeah, the schools are fine, the town is not lean enough, or vice versa. And we don't afford them the opportunity to express that via their vote, if we couple it all in. I'm not saying that we should do one or the other, it's just a point I'd like to make, and I'll stop.
Two last comments, if I may. If you can go back to the scenario one again. This is just personal opinions only. This is all this is. When you see $1 million number, human nature goes, whoa. A lot of discussions and all that. So whatever number you pick, I'm just making a thing. It's like, yeah, no.
It's a special, right?
Your eyebrows only go up at $1 million?
Leave the
That's
market
pretty
guy
impressive.
today.
The other one is just more of a suggestion to the selectmen. Be prepared for any motions that may or may not occur. Remember last year, we had a lot of motions that added a
Attempted ones.
lot of confusion, which causes the problem that we got into.
They came as a surprise.
Right, then everyone got all confused, and as a result, one of the overrides got nixed, which caused a lot of the
Well,
problems.
there was an hour and a half, it was a chairman of the school committee, I believe, got up, and an hour and a half later, Article 3 did exactly what he wanted to have done, and he couldn't be persuaded to stand down, so we went through the drill. Anybody can do that. Anybody on the floor can get up and pull the card and say, I make a motion to blah, blah, blah. So
All I'm recommending
if he
is,
gets a second, if this person gets a second, we have to just go ahead and do it. And this is what town meeting is all about. Sometimes it's a waste of time, and that was, and most often it is not. Might not agree with the person making the motion, but most likely it's
but it was, and
yeah.
which caused the shortfalls that occurred.
Could happen again, there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, I don't think the school budget last year was there was anything that was cut out of the school budget that caused this problem. I think, if I remember right, the override that didn't pass was one that, was it for the SRO and OPEB? OPEB is,
OPEB alone.
I'm not even going to say those words again, right, tonight. But the SRO sort of was an artifact. So that was the only, I think,
I think that pulled because Hamilton decided.
it was on our ballot, but it meant nothing. But the other override did pass, the big one, the
Right, the
300.
operating budget.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So they had a failed budget, but only because of a
Only
sort
because
of
of
an artifact.
Exactly. To your point and to Mike's, unfortunately, all four, well, the three biggies, number two being free cash is not that it's not consequential, non-controversial. But 1, 3, and 4 all took on a materially different
Yes.
meaning and role for the voter at the town hall floor, which is really unfortunate.
Very.
Because of the reasons you
confusing.
both have mentioned,
Yep.
which is not what we want.
Well, again, we have a more collaborative working relationship with the school committee and the district, and that those motions came from the school committee. So
Or-
hopefully,
or
the school committee-
administration,
well,
I mean,
yeah.
either or. I mean,
yeah, or
The
both.
school committee chair, please don't
So-
include the whole school committee in that.
And, okay, and to Jack's point, it's their right as citizen legislators to do that. However, it was an unfortunate curveball, so maybe, we've had a lot of collaboration thus far, so hopefully, and we did have discussions after last year that on a going forward basis, we would try to be aware of those things in advance if someone's going to propose a huge multi-million-dollar
Don't
motion
promote
like that.
what's done.
Yes, yes, that's a way to say it.
So just for fun,
That's why we're here.
I calculated the 4554, and if we took the override of $1,095,000, I think that's sort of what it is. And 45.58%, I wish I could read these, 45.58% was the town share of the override, it would be $499,000 override. And the educational share of that, or 54% of the override, would be almost $594,000. So, just to that option that Julie was talking about. Maybe that's clear.
Is that what you were talking about, Julie?
Oh, phew. I was going to be sad if I misunderstood. That's,
As good as anything else?
well, it's just, on a piece of paper, I was able to do a calculation in 2 seconds. I think we could explain it, and
Is he coming back?
it doesn't change the fact that they're both about $500,000, with a lot of explanation of what it is. What's the $499 for the town, and what's the $594 for the school?
The only thing I'd suggest is you might want to look at, when evaluating that option, the corresponding percentage that it would fund in the level services amount, by taking more of the town piece into the town override, if you will, for purposes of understanding just what kind of that potentially
Right,
arbitrary
this is
number.
what I was asking earlier.
Which could be fair or unfair.
Right.
That's one way of doing it. It does kind of favor a larger increase. You'd want to come in with a massive increase to absorb more of the town's budget to get more of that share, theoretically. I'm not saying it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it does help bolster that, because you back into a number and you're funding the schools at a larger, affordable, I'll call it, go forward rate, year-over-year increase. So I think what you'll find is that
Oh, I
if
see
you're
what you're
splitting 50-50 because of the school's budget being higher, that 5% that you might otherwise entertain as an affordable level of increase might be 6. That's all. I'm just
Right.
saying,
I
know
hear
what
you.
that number is.
I hear
I'm
you.
not trying to say that it isn't the right way to do
No,
it.
I hear you.
To-
Obviously, we have to analyze.
To solve it from both sides, basically.
Yeah.
That's all.
Somewhere in that ballpark, yeah.
I mean, it has that ring of equity, and they're in this, they're in the same ballpark. I don't know that that's the right thing to do, but to your point, you crunch the numbers, so.
Yeah,
glad you
I
did.
mean, just from a simplicity point of view, I haven't
Yep.
looked closely enough, to Jack's point, to say that it is really as fair as it sounds, or works for the town or the schools. Okay. I have nothing more to add to that.
Anybody else in the FinCom have any opinions they want to share? I'd like to hear an opinion other than David shared one. Is it one override or two? I haven't heard anybody other than David mention that.
Well, just to reiterate my point, I think we either go with scenario 1 or the 2, and just 2 and 3 are too, again, nothing.
No, it was just a
are-
jump.
Are a little too confusing.
Mm.
So I think as a resident, I would go with either 1 or 2, but fixing the numbers, as Alex said, to be a little bit more equitable and realistic.
How does everybody else in the FinCom feel about that? I'm going to do the
Yeah, as I've said, on two different occasions, I would support 2 if we can do it in an equitable manner that shows support for the schools, which we all do support the schools, certainly. I think that would, I think that would allow for conversation that I think needs to occur on town meeting floor, because we're looking at, I think, the biggest override that we have ever confronted.
That's right.
So I think the more healthy, focused discussion on what drives town, what drives schools, what do we control, I think would be a good thing. How we cut it in half, or 54-48, or, 50-50, or whatever. Discuss that.
I support an article structure that makes it clear to the voters what they can express support for. Independently, I like the move to have 2 independent articles, override articles, if it can be deemed fair. That's the short of it. We're asking voters to combined approve a $1.1 million override after 539.5 last year, after 331 the year prior. So it's not like these are staying even, and we just need that much more levy capacity each year. So I just think we need to be careful that we're not making the voters' job like too easy, or ours, for that matter.
Or we make it too easy.
I don't know.
Tell me how.
Yeah.
We put it all in one, and we say, yeah.
Well, to Alex's point, it's easy in town meeting if you haven't been to or watch any of the videos to see what's in the minutia. Oh, I either have this, it's a yes or no choice.
Right.
If you look at the history and you add it up, you're talking almost $2 million. $2 million in the last 3 years? At 1.1,
right.
500.
That's right.
Yeah, in permanent levy.
Yeah, so that's not, so you're getting that from roughly 1,500 houses? So 14 something, so that
Very
adds up.
limited audience.
So that, but that's the town we're in love, right? But you got, there's only a finite number, so I kind of agree with your point. I don't know how to do that, though, without, it sounds like I'm disagreeing, but I agree with you. I don't know how we say it's been $2 million for 3 years, and there's not a lot like there's no new school, there's no new roads, there's nothing. So I don't know how we do that without, I don't know how we do that, I guess is.
What's your projection for this is an unfair question.
You can ask
You know
Carol.
it's coming. What's the projection for next time around? Does this help us get well, or does it just?
You mean for 22?
Yeah, no, I'm asking that.
Now, if you go back to the original financial forecast, we knew that free cash was dropping down, which is less and less would be available. The town relies upon free cash to balance the budget. New growth is very little. Looking out, we have debt that'll roll off, that can help us. Like David said, it's a lean, we're level services, so it's a lean machine you have, so.
Thank you, sir.
I have, so scenario 2 and 3, I get it, they're for discussion purposes, but I don't totally agree with the way that the percentages are in override 1 or in override 2. So on the table, we have override 1. We have another option that's all of the town override in an article, all of the school override in an article, and then I would like to throw out a third option where it's 2 overrides, and in one of the articles, you have a portion of the town and school overrides, and in the second article, you have the remaining portion of the town and school overrides.
How would we divide that up?
I don't know. We're asking how do we divide up anything tonight?
So how would we divide it up?
And
That would be something for the selectmen to consider further with the other divisions you're going to be considering.
so, Kara, what would that, why? I'm interested in the idea, and I wonder why you think that's a good, another viable option.
Because it gives, well, again, equity and policy and how you make those decisions and cuts and percentages is a whole nother decision. But, kind of globally, just throwing it on the table is because it does, and then it also runs the risk of making things too confusing on at annual town meeting for a lot of people who don't track this stuff throughout budget season. Nonetheless, I throw it out there because it gives some override to both the town and the school, so people can make a decision if they want to. It's not an all or nothing thing. It's incremental.
So no entity is a complete loser or a complete winner?
Yes.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to understand the reason.
No. Two.
Two,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, we're not talking
Yeah.
leaves, but yeah.
I hear you. I understand.
Right. So 2.
Okay.
Well, no, but it's sort of like 2 and 3, but 2 and 3 fully fund in override 1 the town's increases, and only leaves school money in override 2.
Oh, I see.
So,
Yeah.
so mine would be rolling some of the town override into the second article. Up here it would be override 2. Percentages, don't know, whole other discussion.
Yeah, I get the concept, though. Interesting.
Well, Catherine and John, first you, Catherine, before I make a motion, do you want to say anything else? Because I want to wrap this up, and I'll make a motion that we have 2 overrides.
I don't think I'm ready to vote on that yet, because
I'll ask John in a minute.
okay, that's fine. If I have to vote, I will say no, because I don't know.
Okay.
So-
I'm not going to suggest a specific amount. I'm just saying, do we have 2 or 1 override? That's
Well, I have heard a lot of discussion, and I think to Carrie's point, there's a strategic element to Carrie's point of having 2 overrides that each have a little bit, or not a little, but each have a mixture of both. And if you roll that up, you have the same thing, a bigger override, but there's no big winner and big loser, and you're not asking voters to choose between the towns or the schools, which is my fear. So that's why I'm not convinced it should be 2 overrides. I think there could be some strategic advantages for one, and I think it would be simpler. So, as you said, we've just seen these options tonight, so I'm respectfully asking for a little time to just, absorb this. But I'm,
The next meeting, we'll have to be prepared to vote, because we have a warrant we have to publish.
I understand that, but
The only question right now, I'll hold it if you really want to, and but the question's gonna be, the next time we meet, 2 or 1, or 3 or 5, or whatever else, but, we have to get some instructions to
Right.
our town administrator of how to proceed.
And I guess for me to be comfortable with that, I'm gonna have to go offline, ask a bunch of questions and bring them back, so that I really understand, even to Alex's point, what really is fair.
But again, we haven't,
I understand.
none of the numbers are about fair, and I think lots of suggestions heard tonight sound reasonable to me.
Yeah, I'm just not, as to your point, I'm not convinced that 2 is more or less fair than 1. Not convinced that 1 is maybe more fair to the towns.
Just have 1 override.
Right, but
Throw it all in one
I'm I'm listening and hearing a lot of different viewpoints, and a little worried about the school supporters.
I'm in favor of the 2 overrides for simplicity's sake, and mainly because this board can only control one. We can't control both.
Right.
And so you're throwing your trust to the wind, and will it work, won't it work, and what does it mean? Because we've been there before, and the school issue of budgeting has not been always an easy task to overcome. Well, we started with $1 million override.
but always
Well, now
successful.
we're gonna get it down to 900. Well, we're gonna get it down to 600. You know,
Always successful. Okay.
it's a lot more complicated.
Out of courtesy, Catherine, to delay the vote.
Thank
When
you.
is the next meeting?
25th,
Okay.
a week from today. Yes.
No,
So
March.
if we delay this vote till the next meeting, would that be okay?
25th is the day that we have for the warrant to close, so, yes. Yeah, that would be the last
Next week.
Oh, yeah.
opportunity.
So not only do we have to solve the question of two, and you heard two of us say it's gonna be two, Catherine wants to think about it. We also have to assign dollars amount to that.
Jack, if you've already got the votes, why don't you just vote? I'm
I
fine.
said it courtesy, I said I want to let you.
Except you just
Well,
said
and does,
a courtesy,
Some other
but
questions
that
I
kind of
have
courtesy
as well.
doesn't feel courteous to me, I'm sorry.
Doesn't feel courteous to you?
No, it's, as a courtesy, even though two of us disagree with you, we're gonna give you a week to change your mind, is what it feels like to
It's
me.
It's only one that disagrees with you.
Well, two of you, anyway. I think if we have the
Well,
votes
I was asked
tonight
if
and
I-
people are comfortable, that this board should vote.
Catherine, I was asked what I favored, and I said what I favored, but I do have other questions that need to be answered before I would be willing to vote.
I think we get the
In
time.
addition, we have to come up with, if it's one override, that's easy, I think, and if it's two overrides, we have to assign percentages, as we've been talking about for the last hour. Okay. That's it for tonight, right? Not doing anything
Oh,
else.
water?
No, we're not gonna do water tonight. I'm not doing water. I just got this tonight when I walked in, I haven't read it, and that I know Ernest Ashley's back there, and that perhaps we can do it on the 25th, or something in between. And Eric's there too. You know what, Eric, it's not our fault. You know what, you didn't show up 2 nights ago, whatever it was, we did this, okay? This is the first time I've got anything in writing about this scatter thing. It went from $50,000 to $150,000, and I learned about it a half an hour before our meeting the other night. That's not, you know, that was a huge surprise. And you weren't there to explain it, so, you know, it's not my fault.
I wasn't asked to be there.
It's a public
Sorry,
hearing.
I was there and I had to leave.
One comment, if I may, quickly, just to Mike's question earlier, which I know seems like a rhetorical, like, hey, where does it go from here? All right, but I think that we all need to be grounded in terms of what this town's operating budget, just get to know the rough numbers. If you got 17.5 million, something like that, you go up 2.5%, you get 400 grand there of new levy capacity, you add 100 grand of new growth. All right, we get the ability to tax without an override about $500,000 more roughly next year than the current year, or the current year than the prior year. That's all. So if you look at the school increase, if next year, given the same dollar budget, it was up around 4.5%, that would consume our full extra levy capacity from a 2.5% override. So I just throw that out there. I think people need to understand our levy capacity constraints in ballpark numbers. Yes, I'm off by 50,000 here, maybe 100 grand there. I just want people to be aware of those numbers, right? In terms of how much additional taxing capability we get. It's very limited without an override.
And that does not include any town increases.
That's all in. 500
That's
grand all
all
in.
in, yeah.
So I just
Increased by the overrides that we might pass this year, but we already
Oh,
know
sure,
how those would
sure.
be spent.
For sure.
right?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
just
It's
throwing it
no-
out there.
Yeah, everything that we would spend, ideally, we would have an override that didn't have any items associated with it. So we would permanently increase our
Yeah.
levy limit and
forgive
not have
me,
spent it.
I'm
but-
saying this more for people
No,
watching.
but you're
and I know
right.
this isn't
No, you're
101
absolutely
here with
for
this
what you
audience,
just
people
said.
get it. I'm just trying to
No, you're absolutely right.
state the obvious for those who are watching from
I
afar.
agree, and it's not obvious until you say it, so.
Sometimes.
Well,
May I ask a quick question, and forgive my ignorance?
Please
Is-
go up to the microphone.
So, an over.
Susan,
No.
go up to the microphone.
Okay.
You on the Fincom.
Just for my own clarification, Susan Malin, 18 Burnham Road, is the override above and beyond the 2.5 increase that's allowable by law?
Yes,
Okay, so,
it's
You-
2.5 plus new growth, which is approximately 3% normally.
okay, so you could add what the actual increase is to the override, the 2.5%, and add it to the override, and then you've got the true increase in the budgets, correct?
Say it differently. Say it again.
In other words, so you would take your 2.5%
Yeah,
that you can tax
Yeah.
by law, plus the override,
yeah.
and then you have what you're actually increasing the budgets by.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
So if
thank
we had
you.
$1 million override this year, that'd be another $25,000 next year.
Right,
Increase on that 2.5%, plus the
okay, thank you.
amount that we had before.
You know, the picture's bleak, you know, I don't see our ability, this town's ability, the towns and schools, to live within Proposition 2.5. And, you know, we haven't been doing that for the last several years. It doesn't look like there's any hope on the horizon that we can do that. So we're just trying to fix this year, but as Alex was saying a few minutes ago, we're gonna bump up this mythical 25%, but, you know, doesn't seem to be a willingness or an ability, a willingness, I'll drop the word willingness, an ability to live within Proposition 2.5. So here we are, override city, and next year, I don't know what, the school budget would come up next year, or the town's budget, we're gonna have a similar conversation next year, because we're both in override territory. Otherwise, we have to change the dynamic here, and we need to get the will to do that. And, maybe we'll get the will at town meeting, I don't know.
To put our reality is our reality, as you just stated, and as everyone has articulated here. I'm just asking to put it in a little context. I think it's correct to say, and please chime in, that Proposition 2.5 is a challenge for communities and towns and cities all over Massachusetts. There are increases in education, all ours, education, healthcare, contracts that are exceeding the 2.5% increase. So I've read that. I just want
You're
to
absolutely
double check
correct.
with you to confirm that.
Absolutely correct. Every community, a lot of communities are having, especially Cambridge, who's has money flowing out of their pockets, but every community is facing the same challenges. Trash is going up 11.5%. Health insurance is projected at 8%. You know, and those are our larger single expenditures right there. Those two alone are over $1.2 million. So we have no control over those costs. Well, I guess we do in a way with the health insurance if we
Yeah,
just
and
reduce staff, but
I still support getting as much value for our money as possible and controlling costs and investing, but I just wanted to put our situation into the context of Massachusetts and Prop
Yep.
2.5 challenges.
And we're not alone in this.
no, it's,
Correct.
Prop 2.5 overrides, I believe you pointed out, Carrie, are at an all-time low. Was it you that pointed that out early in this budget season? One of you
I
did.
think it was articles we emailed back and forth.
You pointed it out in articles, right? And so we've got a 10-year bull market. I mean, property values are on the rise, incomes, everything. So we are not alone, but of the communities that are dealing with Prop 2.5 override articles every year, we're a shrinking number. To the point of that article that basically looked at Massachusetts communities, because of those reasons. And the businesses are booming. We just have no business income, right? We have no commercial. Go to Needham, go to Linfield, Market Street,
That's right.
Turf Fields, all
But
paid for. Boom.
What happens
Whatever.
in cities like Beverly and Salem, they just spend more.
Well,
So
I'm not
they-
saying-
they're
I'm not saying
running-
they don't.
They're not running something very different, but they do spend more.
They can afford to spend more because it doesn't fall squarely on the residential.
We have no commercial tax base.
Zero.
We're paying the
Not
price
zero.
of having no commercial tax base in a highly rated school system, basically.
And there are, if I remember the list correctly, if we go, for example, if we go to $20 and change, we'll be in a group of about 25 communities at that rate, somewhere in that range. And you look at all those communities, many are from Western Mass, where I grew up, and they're small communities, no commercial, just residential,
Right.
with the exception of Long Meadow, which is a big community, but they're at the top of,
number one,
they're
yeah.
literally at the top of the list at 2420.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're gonna do, but there are some consistent dynamics of all those communities that are facing the overrides.
Okay, I think we're done. I move the Board of Selectmen adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Is there a motion for FinCom to adjourn? Is there a motion?
Do we have, sure.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion for FinCom to adjourn?
I'll second it.
All in favor?